that we don't have so many participants today, but nevertheless, we are going to record everything, and then it's going to be available on Secretariat website, but also on GIE and Markogas website. So today we have specific topic. This is the third Methane Monday for this year. So we passed a new tracker produced by International Energy Agency. We had insights from OGCI. And today is actually the topic which is not technical one, which is not reporting, measurement, or reduction of methane emissions from technical side. Today we are focused on actually on how to support technically or financially mitigation of methane emissions, and also to present two initiatives related to methane emissions mitigation, but they were still not in our Methane Mondays. After this one, we will have two more before summer break. Dates are fixed and presenters as well. So stay tuned and check them on in May and in June what is going on. And for today, we will start with Mr. Gonzalez from EBRD, from Climate Strategy and Delivery. If I correct, remember the name of department, because EBRD is of course huge organization. Then we will have Mr. Andrew Melek with many hats, but today with the head of Global Methane Initiative for this webinar. And then later on, we will have CEO of Global Methane Hub, Mr. Mena will join us in some 20-30 minutes. So with that, I would like to ask Mr. Gonzalez to start with presentation. If it's okay that you will run it, or let me know if we has to run the slides. So Roberto, floor is yours.
I can run the presentation. I think so. Yes.
For that.
So that should be. Are you seeing the presentation, or?
Not yet, but maybe you can introduce yourself and let's see how to start to run presentation.
Yeah. So my name is Roberto Gonzalez, and I work at the EBRD in their climate strategy and delivery team, and I'm focusing on energy transition, renewable fuels, methane reduction, and that is my role. So the role of our department is to ensure that all the bank investments are Paris aligned and support the green agenda of the bank. So yeah,
we can see your presentation, so all fine. Please continue.
Perfect. Thank you very much. So the EBRD has several objectives regarding the climate ambitions of the bank. One of them is to increase the share of our green financing and to go above 50% of our annual business volume. Also to align all activities with the objective of the Paris Agreement. So since the beginning of this year, all our investments needs to be Paris aligned. So that means that there is a deep analysis of each one of them, every type of investments, to ensure that they are aligned with the objectives of the Paris alignment. And then one of the objectives of the bank is also to double the private sector climate finance when we invest in projects. So come along with private investors and try to focus that investment in climate financing. So our countries of operation are shown in the map in the slide. So we are present in North Africa, in Eastern Europe, Turkey, Central Asia, and we operate in around 38 countries. Yeah, so that is in a snapshot the EBRD. So for last year, we invested 6.4 billion euros in green financing, and we achieved already 50% of our annual business volume on green investments. It's the second year in a row that we achieved 50% or more on our investments, way ahead of our target that it was 2025. So since 2006, sorry, we have invested around 50 billion euros in green projects. And yeah, I mean, you can see the amounts of emissions and reduction and the projects that we have signed. So we're very active on green type of projects, and those include projects leading to methane emissions reduction. So in that regard, so the bank is a supporter of the Global Methane Pledge. We were the first MDB to sign that during the COP in Glasgow. Well, this is a statement from our president, but we have been engaging in our countries of operation since way before that to tackle the methane emissions issue. So our approach is, I mean, we said that we have three pillars. One is science, the other one is investment and finance, and the other one is policy and markets. So in each pillar, we have different, we deploy different things to tackle the emissions. So we can, and we are funding national measurement campaigns. That could be sectoral or cross-sectoral campaigns. When you do the measurement campaigns, you also identify where the emissions are, so you can do a screening, understand what is the cost to abate those emissions, and one thing very important that we try to do with these measurement campaigns is to try to get a realistic or a more accurate emissions baseline. Because that will help then for any further investment in reduction to be sure that they impact and assess correctly the methane reduce. So when it comes to investment and finance, we can support feasibility studies, but we also, I mean, we are at the end of a bank, so we can finance projects or programs for methane emissions reduction. They need obviously to be aligned with the bank mandate and with the bank requirements that the investments should be Paris aligned, and that requires several set of analysis and checks that needs to be that the project needs or program needs to comply with. And we also have explore actually in previous in the recent past some climate finance instruments like the emission savings and the Article 6 of the Paris Alignment to try to get an improvement on the economics in the methane emissions abatement projects. In terms of policies and market, we support the governments to report their emissions, to put in place an MRV systems. We also support the governments to join, for instance, the Global Methane Pledge. We have done that in several of our countries of operations. And finally, what we want is basically the more transparency. So we support also in the disclosure, in adding targets, in report against those targets, and try to bring the light to this sector. So we have carried out, and that is in the next slide. We are active in several countries doing some technical assistance, as we call it, or technical cooperation in different countries. But basically, what we do when we're doing this is we support measurement campaigns. The idea is to improve, as I mentioned before, the data that is available, with the objective that once you have a good baseline and good data, you can then move into a monitoring, reporting, and verification system in which we support the companies or the government to develop the procedures, the templates, and the framework that you need to have in place for such a system to work. Also, we support the development of a roadmap of investments that is required for the reduction of methane emissions. And that, well, obviously has some analysis of the different projects, some type of map curves in which is optimized by the emission savings and the cost that results from that project for the emissions. We, as I mentioned, policy dialogue, and something that is very important is that we try to provide capacity building. So in some of our countries of operations, what we see is that there is a willingness to tackle the methane emissions, but there is a lack of knowledge. And there is a lack also of institutional representation for the methane emissions issues. So there is no dedicated power or dedicated department or anything. So we try to support that capacity building through these technical assistances in the governments or companies that we work on. So far we have what we call Methane 1.0. It's basically we were focusing on gas infrastructure, okay? And that the idea behind that is that a lot of the emissions in these countries comes from the gas infrastructure. There is also some that has a lot of associated gas that is vented or flare, but that is creates for us a big problem from Paris alignment perspective to try to invest or support that. So that is why at the beginning we were focusing on this gas infrastructure. So we started in Ukraine, and there we supported Naftogaz to join OGMP 2.0 in 2020. So for obvious reasons, this technical cooperation is on hold, but the company is very keen and has continued to do a lot of work on their side, and they're very keen into restarting the engagement and try to decrease their methane emissions. Another country is Kazakhstan, in which we have reviewed some of the Kazakh gas investment plans. We have reviewed the emissions estimates and baselines, and we recently finished a measurement campaign in which we use a combination of SOFIs and cameras to cross-check the emissions of some gas processing facilities. Then a country that has a big gas infrastructure is Egypt. And then there we have done an initial measurement campaign that was tackling some of the facilities that were suggested by the authorities. But now, and we supported Egypt in joining the Global Methane Pledge. But now we are preparing for a second measurement campaign that will be much more targeted based on the knowledge that we got from the first measurement campaign, and we will use different systems, including a mobile monitoring unit that will go around facilities, and we will be even monitoring emissions from distribution pipes and distribution systems in the cities. So following this measurement campaign, we will then support the development of the monitoring, reporting, and verification system. for the gas within the Ministry of Petroleum in Egypt. So following the global methane pledge, we went into what we call methane 2.0, and that is so the country that we just started is Uzbekistan, and that is not only focused on gas infrastructure, but we're also targeting agribusiness and waste management. So we supported Uzbekistan in joining the global methane pledge. Now we're working towards a first measurement campaign. So in Uzbekistan, there is a lot of will to tackle the methane issues, and there has been some political support with some working groups created. So it's a place where we are very excited about working on, because we believe that it is a combination of political will and obviously it's a country with that has a big potential to reduce methane emissions. And this is the countries that we have active right now, but we're continuously engaging with countries and companies for this. Another thing that we're doing, and it's in a completely different region, is more in Eastern Europe, is that we're becoming very active in biomethane and biogas. So that is more targeting the agribusiness and the waste sectors. But we have done some technical cooperation work in terms of how to develop the biomethane economy, following the objectives from the Repower EU for biomethane production in Europe. And there we are very active in finding financing and supporting biomethane and biogas projects that we believe are very important in order to tackle also the methane emissions issue. So that is all from my side. If you have any questions or any comments, please let me know.
Yes, thank you very much, Roberto. Interesting to see, because there is a way to finance actually then projects to mitigate methane emissions, although there will be actually investment somehow in natural gas infrastructure just to decrease emissions. But I'm glad to hear that there is a way. We will come back with questions after all three presentations. Now I see actually our next speaker already ready. So let's start. I mean, they are both across the Atlantic, so good morning to both. But we can start with Andrew Melek and with the Global Methane Initiative, and then going with the Global Methane Hub. But thank you, Mr. Melek, that you are already here. Good to know. But then Andrew first. Andrew, we just cannot hear you, so let's see.
Oops, how about now?
Yeah, okay, now
Fantastic.
It's good, great.
Excellent. All right, thanks everyone for having me today. Very good morning to you from Washington, D.C. My name is Andrew Melek. I'm with the U.S. Environmental Protection Agency in our Climate Change Division, in our non-CO2 programs branch. And as a part of that team, one of the many hats that I wear is I support the Global Methane Initiative technical assistance work in the oil and gas sector that EPA conducts internationally. And so it's my pleasure to be here this afternoon with all of you. I'm going to share a little bit today about what GMI is for those of us who may not be familiar. Some of the general tools and resources that we have that support all this global action on methane, and there is a lot of action on methane, which we're of course very excited to see. I do have a specific example of sort of how GMI works with our partners and the kind of sort of approach that we take, which is a little bit different, I think, than perhaps EBRD or the Methane Hub. So looking forward to sharing that with all of you. And then just a couple of the upcoming resources and events that we have that are pretty exciting and we're looking forward to sharing. So I'll go ahead and get started by just a quick overview of GMI. So we are an international public-private partnership. We were founded in 2004 under what was called a Methane to Markets program. We rebranded in 2010, 2011 as GMI, and essentially we have three different focus areas. So oil and gas, biogas, which includes all of our agriculture work, municipal wastewater, and landfills and municipal solid waste as well. And of course, we have a coal mines group. So today I'll be focusing, of course, just on our oil and gas side of things, but of course we do work in other methane areas. We have partner country delegates that, basically join voluntarily. This is a voluntary initiative. But at the national government level, we have a lot of delegates in our various subcommittees, as well as our steering committee. And we have a vast project network of about 700 or so stakeholders. And of course, basically all of our countries that so far have joined GMI, they represent about 75% of anthropogenic methane emissions. We have a little map there on the right-hand side. So just a quick sort of snapshot of what member countries are present, both in our steering committee and then across
I'm not seeing any
perhaps
presentation.
other subcommittees.
Apologies, we didn't see so far your slides, and I was not sure if you are planning to do it or.
Oh,
Oh.
I'm very sorry about that.
When you mentioned the map, so then I realized that you think that you are running the slides. I mean that we see that.
No problem. Let me see. I think try this one.
Yes, now it's something happening and we see the slides. Great.
Great. All right. Thank you for letting me know. Okay, so I'll just flash back quickly to the previous slide. Down on the right here is sort of our coverage. Again, 75% of anthropogenic methane emissions are covered within the countries that have joined GMI. And I've noted here on this slide the contracting parties to energy community that are involved in GMI, in case anyone is interested. So we do have a number of those countries that have joined and worked with us over the years, and we thank them for their support. Since 2004, we've leveraged over $650 million in funding for projects. We've reduced over 500 million metric tons of CO2 equivalent, including 40 million metric tons in just 2021. And we have dozens and dozens of tools and resources for methane mitigation, and I'm going to highlight, like I said, just a couple of those today. So GMI, essentially, we're an empowerment organization, right? And so we have a lot of technical expertise between our staff and also our contractors, who are all professionals in their field and have decades of experience themselves. And so rather than, GMI doesn't necessarily, we don't invest money ourselves, but we focus on the direct technical assistance aspect of methane mitigation. And we do this by empowering our partners and basically build their capacity to do a number of things. Emissions measurement, reporting, verification, assessing needs, identifying different strategies and approaches that can be taken. Some countries come to us with some NDC targets and goals. Some countries are like, we have this global methane pledge target that we want to reach. Some other countries are like, hey, we have this national oil and gas company that maybe they have their own goals that they want to reach for OGMP 2.0. And we welcome all of these stakeholders to engage with us and see how we could help them. We would do that by providing different kinds of tools, guidance documents, resources, either that we may already have off the shelf or things that we could develop hand in hand with these stakeholders. This also would include things like sharing best practices, fostering technical exchange, things like developing implementation plans, investment plans, basically, yeah, things like that. So here's an example of something that we have previously developed. So this tool it's in beta right now. We're still figuring out exactly how we want it to work, but we've done a lot of testing with some countries, Indonesia and Colombia specifically, that have given us a lot of great feedback. So this tool, it's an emission estimations tool. And essentially what we have is, it's a spreadsheet-based tool that incorporates emission factors from the US and Canada. And we apply this with certain countries and stakeholders where they come to us and they're essentially like, this is our emissions inventory. right? And in Indonesia is like, hey, we have, this X emissions and we have these companies that want to report to us, but we don't know exactly how to collect and manage that data. And when we do manage that data, we just use default IPCC emission factors. But we want to refine our inventory. How can we improve this, right? And so this tool basically seeks to take facility level data. It incorporates activity data, infrastructure data, gas composition data, and essentially gives you an output of what your methane emissions as well as CO2 and N2O are. Again, it's still in beta, and we're still adding a few tweaks here and there. But we found that in places like Indonesia and Colombia, that this is quite a valuable resource for them. It's something that they could use to develop their emissions baseline, refine their emissions inventory, basically make progress towards meeting their goals. So this is one example of a tool that we're currently working on. We have a number of kind of off-the-shelf guidance documents, for example, identifying and evaluating opportunities for GHG mitigation and also operational efficiency, as well as effective methane management in oil and gas. And some of these we've done in coordination with our partners at UNECE, so we thank them for their support on this. We do a number of workshops and trainings. We've conducted lots of those over the pandemic when travel wasn't possible. We also have done in the past site visits, pre-feasibility studies. We have dozens and dozens of measurement studies that we've conducted as well in places like Mexico, Indonesia, Southeast Asia, that we've basically developed a lot of rapport with a lot of our partners by doing those things, and we're looking forward to maybe progressing forward from just measurement campaigns, and instead perhaps, maybe taking data that, baseline data that companies have gathered, countries have gathered from other sources, and using those to maybe incorporate into some tools and resources like the one I just showed to help them improve perhaps their emissions inventory. Conferences and presentations, we recently hosted in coordination with CCAC, a Global Methane, Climate, and Clean Air Forum in Washington, D.C. in September 2022. That was very successful. We had over 800 participants in that. We were very excited to see such high-level participation and engagement from, I think, 65, 66 different countries. Sorry, I think I'm hearing some feedback. I'm not sure if someone might have their mic on. We also conduct subcommittee meetings throughout the year. We have a number of those coming up that I'll talk about that we'd like to invite our colleagues here on the line to join if they would like to provide some input. So that was kind of a brief overview of sort of the general tools and resources that GMI has at our disposal at the moment, and now an example of how we conduct our approach with different countries. So we've been working with Indonesia since 2010 when they joined GMI, and EPA, under the auspices of GMI, conducts a lot of this technical assistance work, like I mentioned earlier. And the way we've done that in Indonesia is, for those first couple of years, we conducted several measurement campaigns in coordination with a number of Indonesia's oil and gas companies. So Lamigas, Vico, Star. We worked with the Directorate General for Oil and Gas within Indonesia's Ministry for Energy and Mineral Resources. And some conferences there, some methane mitigation items that we discussed there. And then from that, perhaps, we don't know for sure, of course, but since then, right, Indonesia has developed some new guidelines and regulations for basically greenhouse gas inventory, development, and mitigation of greenhouse gases from energy sector sources. And they've also developed a national strategy for oil and gas methane emissions reduction. So they came to us in the last year or two, and we're looking to build off of the previous work that we've done with them to essentially help them refine their greenhouse gas inventory and identify potential methane mitigation opportunities. And this, of course, would be in support of their NDC targets within the energy sector. So at this moment, we're working with, like I said, the Ministry of Energy and Mineral Resources, their Directorate General for Oil and Gas. We've also partnered with a state-owned company, Pertamina. The ministry brought them on board to basically help give some feedback into the initial stages of this process. And so that tool that I shared with all of you earlier, the screenshot of that spreadsheet tool, the emissions estimation tool, we're working with these two stakeholders to essentially develop a comparison between how our tool can help the ministry versus how Pertamina's own in-house company tool that they've developed on their own, how those two can build off of each other and essentially create the most ideal solution to refine an inventory based on the information that's provided to them. So we're developing and updating either our tool or Pertamina's tool based on the feedback that we get. We've got some great information from them on how it could be improved, and we're working on that as we speak. And at the end of the day, what we're going to have is a concrete tool that we hand over to the ministry, and they are able to use when they have the remaining 40 or 50 oil and gas companies in Indonesia alone that report to them under this new sort of framework for emissions inventory building. So the ministry will have a new resource that they can use, and a new data management system essentially to kind of compile and bring together all this emissions data information. And of course, another output of this will be that their overall greenhouse gas inventory will be refined, right? As of right now, at the national level, they're just using IPCC default emission factors. And since this tool would incorporate the use of, country-specific emission factors for the US and for Canada, not necessarily for Indonesia, but it is a step in the right direction. And perhaps in the future, we'd be looking to work with Indonesia and other stakeholders to develop Indonesia-specific emission factors, but of course, that's a little bit down the line. So I know we're kind of running short on time here. I want to give Marcelo a chance to speak, of course. So we have a number of resources coming up that are in development. For instance, a policymaker framework, a guidance document. This is a really exciting resource that basically highlights all of the tools across GMI that are not just energy sector specific, but that kind of fit in on this timeline of what policymakers need to do and how they can get to reaching certain goals and implementing certain policies. So matchmaking basically our resources with what policymakers may need at certain steps of the policymaking process. So we're very excited to launch that in hopefully this summer. And a little bit after that, we have a specific resource that's dedicated to recommended technologies for mitigation of methane from oil and gas systems specifically. So this is building off of a domestic tool that we use in the United States from the Natural Gas STAR program. And we're basically refreshing that and updating it for international audience, and we look forward to releasing that maybe sometime later this fall. I did mention a couple oil and gas subcommittee events that are coming up. We have some brainstorming sessions that we're starting to organize. No dates as of yet, but they should be coming up in the next couple of weeks and months. What we hope to do here is bring our stakeholders together and basically come up with ideas for how we can best leverage our resources and our technical expertise to help our stakeholders, right? What are the barriers to policy implementation? What are the barriers to methane mitigation? What are the barriers to, inventory emissions baselines and refinement and so on, and how can GMI leverage itself to help all of our stakeholders most efficiently? So we look forward to those. And finally, the next iteration of our Global Methane Forum will be taking place in Geneva in March. This will be co-hosted with UNECE, so we thank them for their support on that, and we look forward to working with them to develop an incredible event. Hopefully we can see all of you there. I believe, yes, that is all that I have for now. So I will stop sharing my screen, and I look forward to hearing from folks if you have any questions. So thank you very much, everyone, for your time.
Thank you, Andrew. So putting another dimension of this global methane emissions picture. And now I would like to ask Mr. Marcelo Mena from Global Methane Hub. I believe that it's the youngest organization here on the table. So Mr. Mena, floor is yours. Now we can see the slide, but we cannot hear you yet.
There we go. Okay, great. So here's my presentation. Thank you for the invitation. And I'll just share with you a little bit about the Methane Hub and what we've been doing as a strategy in the context of methane. Of course, there's one thing that we all must bear in mind is this very rapid increase in the concentration of methane much higher than pre-industrial era. And we also have to reflect on the fact that when we talk about methane mitigation, methane has contributed to nearly half of the net warming that we've experienced, and also is a faster way to reduce temperature in the short term, given its short-term impact. And also the fact that many of these things that we do on methane mitigation could also bring benefits to local communities, and therefore those who take action on methane mitigation receive local benefits too. And of course, you can see the different sectors. And when I actually presented to the ag sector the importance of reducing methane emissions in the ag sector recently in a ministerial meeting, they always said, well, we have to start with the energy sector, and of course, we need to do all of these sectors overall. The thing that we also need to have in mind is that only 2% of climate finance today is dedicated to methane mitigation, and I'll just talk a little bit about that right now. We worked with the Climate Policy Initiative, which put out a report called The Landscape of Methane Mitigation Finance, in which they highlighted that we were, first off, only having a very small percentage of finance go into methane mitigation, but also the regions in which we are doing these actions are not necessarily matching where these emissions occur. And if you look at where the emissions are versus where the investment is, there is a massive lack of investment in the energy sector, despite the very important opportunities that arise from capping leaks, and therefore economic incentives themselves need to be reanalyzed in a way that we actually shift investment toward what we want to do. There are a lot of investments on the waste sector in comparison, but these are not fully matching the mitigation that we require either, since they sometimes promote solutions that might actually create more methane. So the top idea here is then that we are lacking the finance that we require, and we need to really crack the nut on fossil fuel mitigation of methane because of the opportunities that exist in this and the fact that we require to reduce those emissions substantially. Now, so the Methane Hub, I just talked to you a little bit overall. We are working in regions covering around 70% of all global methane emissions, including China and India, because we basically do not need to only work with GMP countries, and we are engaging, for example, bilaterally with a coalition of different NGOs working in China, and most recently we are working on a subnational level in India, namely on the waste sector. Also, the important thing here is that there are a lot of new measurements from space that will help us really track these emissions a lot more. A lot of the reports that have come out today, for example, on the fact that 70% of emissions, the observed emissions from the energy sector are 70% higher than what is estimated from bottom-up approaches, is actually anchored on one satellite system, 3 satellites from GHCSat. But soon this year, we're going to have Carbon Mapper, we're going to have Methane Sat. EMIT is already providing information regarding methane emissions in the energy sector in the context of IMEO. And so therefore, there will be a change, and we need to be ready to prepare to take that information for mitigation action overall. The Methane Hub itself has committed. There's been almost $200 million in funding for the initial 3-year window. We are on our way to around 100 million more already, which President Biden mentioned in last week's Methane Major Economies Forum. And the way that we will reach our target of supporting countries in 35% mitigation by 2030 will be raising the prominence of methane in multiple reports, highlighting these emissions in satellite platforms, supporting technological breakthroughs. We are about to launch a major research initiative on agricultural methane next month in Washington, D.C., accelerating methane policy and supporting local action. So many times we are helping develop new regulations both on a national scale on NDCs, but also helping secure some of these emissions, such as the case of the European Union, which is under discussion, or the US methane rules on the energy sector. Steering finance towards methane mitigation, and there's multiple ways of doing this, including preparation facilities for project design that will help shift some of the development finance towards methane mitigation, and actually tracking our winds through satellite observations. Just general aspects, and I'm gonna go straight into energy. But in energy sector, we have opportunities that are easy to look into, and so we could track leaks from space and repair those leaks and take action, generate savings, and there are regulations in place, but some need to be defended. In the case of agriculture, we need to have awareness of what it means on the economic development of a country overall, but we can make a lot of progress improving productivity and actually reducing and actually establishing new practices. And finally, on the waste, we have the issues of plugging leaks that can have local benefits overall. In the energy sector, we know that this is very much spread out in the coal sector, the gas sector, oil and gas, and less of an issue in bioenergy, though we need to still look into that. And just overall, we have the scenario that we could have a large mitigations in different sectors, but we are focusing on some locations overall, looking into where these emissions are going to stay. So a lot of our focus on coal, for example, is based on our work in China, Australia, and potentially down the line, India. A lot of the work on oil and gas probably needs to be done in the context of national oil companies. And we also have to be looking into how to shift some of the profits that have already been obtained towards methane mitigation and improve profitability also in that regard. So the way that we'll be doing this is helping governments in establishing regulations, but also increase capacity in having better solutions. But also, we also believe that carbon pricing and corporate accountability and trade have unique places on this, sharing the data and influence policy to hold high methane emitters accountable. And we are one of the major funders of the Methane Alert Response System, along with the Bezos Earth Fund, in which we hope to help this UN institution work with companies to plug those leaks, to make those issues visible, and start mitigating methane overall. So thanks for your time, and that's my presentation.
Thank you, Marcelo, for presentation, and thank you for joining in early morning, like Andrew did it as well, because for us it's afternoon, and we also have some participants in the evening, let's say from Japan. So thank you to all three presenters, and actually for all of them I have one common question, and that would be of course, how to approach you if you have great idea and great program and great plan, how to reduce methane emissions. Because I understood that is actually for global methane initiative goes through the governments, because countries are members, if I got it correctly. For EBRD can be either companies or governments and states. And now you also said that for Global Methane Hub is actually governments are partners in doing projects. So maybe a bit of hints how to start if really company or government has serious program and is willing to start with the project, but of course needs support. So, yeah,
I would
start first.
I'll just start out with saying that, and I'll let, of course, the other colleagues chime in. We have two different types of support. We support governments directly through the Climate and Cleaner Coalition and through IMEO, and potentially through other international organizations such as IFAD for the agricultural sector. We're working to design project preparation facilities with some MDBs that will be promoted as soon as these are ready. So that's on the government side. But on the NGO side, we do support many of the different NGOs that provide analytics, such as Ember, Carbon Limits, and others, to help us out, EDF and Energy Foundation, and many others that have been working in the space long before the Methane Hub started. On the advocacy side, we also work with communities directly because we think that we need to have all those solutions. And if the economic case, for example, for methane mitigation is not strong enough, obviously communities that are empowered with information that's provided from the remote sensing is going to be a really important way to get this to work and use information to hold them accountable for those emissions that are not being plugged for multiple reasons. So I said in the chat the email if you want some information. But basically that's the way that the Methane Hub has operated.
Thank you. Thank you. Please, Andrew, Roberto, who will.
So I'll say GMI, our approach is mostly with national governments. Those folks will reach out to us, and however they need assistance, we'll get in touch with them, and it's pretty straightforward. When countries themselves join GMI, they sign sort of a general MOU that covers the kind of technical assistance and support that we'd be providing them. Countries that are not part of GMI, I think we are still, of course, willing and able to work with them. It's just a matter of, would we have the funding support? Would EPA have the funding support under the auspices of GMI to conduct that work, I think would be the question. So we would welcome any entities at the government level who are interested in supporting this, at least starting that conversation to see how that project could go. And then I would say our other focus would probably be those national oil companies, national oil and gas companies. Those are the ones who have, like Marcelo shared, the most emissions. And, I think that there's the greatest potential for us to collaborate with them because we would hope to have also the buy-in of the national government in that country itself. So I would say those are the two big spaces that GMI is focused on at the moment.
Thank you. Thank you.
For the EBRD case, it is several routes. So some of the engagement with the national TSOs or national gas companies has come from long time standing relationships with EBRD, with governments same. So it depends in each country and the stakeholder engagement that we have there. But I mean, the only condition is that in our case needs to be one of our countries of operation in order for us to get involved and support.
And as I actually mentioned immediately after your presentation, so actually, despite, of course, oil and gas company can approach you for projects with emission mitigation, this will not be obstacle. This is the point.
No, I mean it is. I mean it is in a project by project case. So I mean, to be clear, for instance, if it's a methane, for a new production site for oil, it will be a no-go. So better let the oil and the gas on the field. But if it's in an operating facility or operating installations, and there is a real impact on the investment in terms of emission reductions, yeah, it's something that we can consider.
Thank you for that, because I wanted to underline this, because now in European Union, but also in the energy community, we had also a lot of discussions about this natural gas and EBRD not financing anything and so on and so on. So, but this is important. It was important to underline this. So with that,
yeah, it needs to be aligned with our methodologies and Paris alignment and fossil fuel approach. But yeah, we can.
With that, I would like to invite others to put the questions, to raise the hands, or to type it in the chat, because we have really three organizations which so far were not included in methane emissions, and they are really not from technical side and then more for support side. So, and people from companies present here can really put the questions. I mean, now or after via emails, because we are going to publish our presentations and recorded webinar. But in the meantime, I see that Mr. Zavea, if I'm not mistaken, yes, has a question. So, Marek, please.
Thank you very much, Rina. I have the following question. It's very interesting to see that you're looking at various very diverse options for methane emission mitigation. And I cannot help thinking at the same time to the IEA methane tracker. And has any of your organizations compared the data that you found in your projects with the data from the methane tracker? And if not, well, I'm just suggesting it might be useful to do so. I'm not sure if I'm clear, just there's a methane emission cost, the marginal cost abatement curve presented on the IEA's methane tracker website. And as you're funding projects that result in methane emission reductions, you have all the data available that allow you to establish case-specific methane emissions abatement costs. So very useful if those can be shared at least anonymously to help put some actual data in front of the data derived a little bit more indirectly by IEA. Can I hear from you, please? Thanks.
Thank you, Marek.
Yeah, so
yeah, let's see. Roberto, you started then.
yeah, so we have used the data from the methane emissions tracker as a basis for some of the studies. So I mean the consultants that are supporting us have used that. But then we are targeting like specific subsectors. Then we go more into granularity and then check facilities and try to find investments or abatement projects in specific facilities. So a good test will be this Uzbekistan project that we are doing when we establish a baseline that is much more wider, and then it's something that we can cross-check against the tracker.
And what came out of the comparison of the project-specific versus generic data that from IEA?
So by project specific, I mean like in a specific site, specific leaks were found and like how to stop those leaks. It's not like archetypes of projects, or it's very specific to a specific facility that we were analyzing. For instance, one of the examples was in Kazakhstan. We installed sofis around a facility, and we explore that. I mean, we measure that for a period of time in order to understand where the leaks were coming and how to tackle them. So it was very, very site specific. So then we didn't compare back to any origin because we were targeting that specific facility.
Okay, thanks. Any input from overseas?
I'd say that that's probably the most important thing to overcome, because we've seen how the benefits from plugging these leaks are very high, yet something is happening regarding the culture within a company that curtails these investments to be done. And maybe it's opportunity cost, maybe it's maybe it's just the cost of it's actually a better time is better spent on expanding production instead of plugging leaks. But that's why it really helps to know that we need other rules to accompany the economic benefits to plugging these leaks. So that means carbon pricing, in the case of methane fee in the U.S. will be very important for that. But in the case of other places, it might be a regulation. But what is clear is that voluntary measures themselves are not enough to have companies seize on the opportunity to lowering losses and increasing productivity in their operations. And so therefore, that's probably where we need to be going overall. The MAC curves are important, of course, to give us the theoretical opportunities, but we need to dig deeper into understanding why we're only spending $100 million total on track finance on methane mitigation in the energy sector per year.
Yeah, well, did you go and dig deeper? That was my question, not the general one.
I mean, not in our case, but we understand that that's where the problem is, and that's why we're actually trying to understand that overall. But it's clear that it's not just economic benefits; it's opportunity cost without doubt, and it's about who decides. Obviously, it seems that operations and maintenance people are not necessarily the ones that hold the biggest budget within an oil company, and expansion is over, and new infrastructure is probably probably a little bit more prioritized. And so we have to, we don't have to solve the decision-making process of an individual company. The way that we recommend this is, that voluntary measures do not suffice, and we need to bring in other means to provide more pressure, including carbon pricing or methane regulations.
Thanks.
And if Andrew would like to add something to this question.
I think what I'll add is thank you for the question. We don't use the tool very much specifically for particular projects, but rather I would say when we're understanding ourselves and analyzing how a particular project could provide a particular level of impact, that's a really valuable tool that we use to get ourselves up to speed on that and to help us become more aware of exactly what kind of ways could be implemented for mitigation. And also, I think, we work a lot with our State Department for, quick turn requests on things like, hey, this country wants to join this pledge, or this country was interested in joining this thing, right? And what kind of emissions impact, or what kind of impact on emissions would they have if they were to implement XYZ kind of project? And this is one of the many tools that we use to provide those kind of answers. So I would say more generally speaking is how the tool is helpful for us at this point.
Thanks, but do you come up with abatement costs that are comparable or not? Do you see that kind of 40% roughly abatement that is reached at net negative costs? Or is
That's
it
a good question.
different?
We have colleagues that do that kind of modeling, and I'm not aware of exactly the results of those particular studies, but I do know that EPA is working on it. That's all I can say at this point.
Okay, thanks.
I see that we maybe have topic for another Methane Monday with the Marek as a presenter or developing this further. For now, I would say that we are actually at the end of foreseen time. I don't see any other raised hands. So thank you for participation. Thank you to our presenters to putting insights on this dimension of mitigation of methane emissions. We will publish slides. We will publish also a recorded webinar. For now, this is it. So have a good day. Who started with the day, or a good night and good afternoon still. The next Methane Monday is taking place on the 22nd of May. So date is confirmed, moderation is confirmed. We will have excellent presenters. We will have a round table on transparency to see how transparency fits between confidentiality, competition, and then requirements from the society and the need to put the real data on emissions. So all the best and see you in a month's time.